Okay, so this week's Parsha is Beha'alosecha, which Irina pointed out has a lot of, it's really jam-packed with a lot of interesting topics, kind of wide breadth of topics. So we'll talk about two of the things that it mentions and sort of tie them together. So the first thing I want to mention is we'll go through sort of a short summary of things that happen. So Aaron is taught how to light the menorah, kindle the lights of the menorah in the Mishkan for the first time. We are introduced to the concept of Pesach Sheni, which is like a second Pesach a month after the first for people who are ritually impure, that they can bring the Pesach offering. Bnei Yisrael leaves Har Sinai after camping there for a year after receiving the Torah. And we get to the issue of the man. So they start to complain about the man famously, and they say, if only we had meat to eat. We remember the fish we ate in Egypt for free, and the cucumbers, melons, leeks, onions, and garlic. Now our appetite is gone. There's nothing to look at but this man. So they've just come, they're like still in the physical place where they received the Torah. It's not like, oh, remember that time that we received the Torah a year ago? They're still camping at the base of Har Sinai, and they have like the chutzpah, right? Bnei Yisrael is known as a chutzpah. We're all known as a chutzpahdik people. They have the chutzpah to like complain about this miracle food that, by the way, Rashi says tasted like honey donuts. So this is not like, right, it's not like lumps of margarine that they're having to force down their throats. This is like a delicious food that like, would we all not love to eat honey donuts every day and like not have to worry about it? So they have the gall to complain. And Moshe, there's this really interesting scenario where Moshe kind of snaps, right? He like freaks out to Hashem. He's so upset. It says in the words in the Chumash are that he's like distraught. He's like severely upset, I'm sure embarrassed. He's also the go-between between these like complaining people and Hashem. And he comes to Hashem very raw, very vulnerable, and very upset. And kind of breaks down. He says, why have you brought this trouble on your servant? What have I done to displease you that you put the burden of all these people on me? Did I conceive all these people? Did I give them birth? Why do you tell me to carry them in my arms as a nurse carries an infant?
He's complaining to Hashem.
He's complaining to Hashem. Bnei Yisrael complains to him about the man, and he goes to Hashem like saying all of this.
Complaining to Hashem, like
yes. So did I conceive these people? Did I give them birth? Why do you tell me to carry them in my arms as a nurse carries an infant to the land that you promised them on oath to their ancestors? If this is how you are going to treat me, please go ahead and kill me if I have found favor in your eyes, and do not let me face my own ruin. So he's obviously at the end of his rope. He's even wishing for death, which is not the first time that a leader of Bnei Yisrael has said those words to Hashem. And I think it's funny. He's like, did I give them birth? Did I conceive them? Like, it's like when you're angry at your kid and you take them to your husband and you're like, this is your son, please deal with them. Like, this is not my child to deal with. You need to handle this. And he's also saying, like, I didn't give them birth and I didn't conceive them. I'm not their mother, and I'm also not their father, and I'm also not their nurse, right? These people cannot be my burden alone. So one thing that I found interesting that Rabbi Jonathan Sachs points out about this one episode is just a small piece, but that sometimes it's lonely at the top, right? To be doing the right thing, to be the leader of Bnei Yisrael, it can sometimes be a very lonely proposition. And I think that translates into sometimes when we're doing the right thing and we find ourselves like separated from the tzibor, it can be lonely. And Rabbi Joseph B. Soloveitchik has a famous book called A Lonely Man of Faith, and it's partially about that concept where doing the right thing is not always the popular thing, and you can sometimes feel very separate from the rest of the world. So just a small point that I thought was interesting. So we see Hashem's response, right? Moshe is like opening up to him, totally upset. And Hashem says, gather for me 70 of the elders of Israel. I will take some of the spirit, meaning the Ruach HaKodesh that is on you, and I'll put it on them. And they'll bear the burden of the people along with you so that you will not bear it all by yourself. So he's being very practical. I feel like in all these, like, it's very modern, very current, right? You have to validate, right? I'm a therapist, so for sure this comes along in therapy, but in any marriage, there's that famous video of the woman complaining to the man, and she has all these troubles. She has a nail sticking out of her head, and he's like, wants to just say, just take out. She's like, oh my God, my head is killing me. She's got a nail sticking out of her forehead. And he's like, wants so badly to say, just take out the nail. But you can't solutionize, right? You have to like be with the person and their feelings. You have to validate them. You have to understand where they're coming from. So here Hashem is just solutionizing. Moshe's like so upset that he's feeling suicidal practically. And Hashem is like, okay, so get 70 elders and like establish yourself, establish some of these elders for me. Very practical. This is pretty different than when we first see Hashem speaking to Moshe at the burning bush. He's commanding Moshe, this is the first time they're interacting in that way. He's commanding him to go to Paro to, let my people go. And Moshe's feeling very unsure of himself. And Hashem doesn't necessarily reassure him, like, don't worry, it's going to be okay. But he does give him, there's a lot of back and forth about it. Moshe's like, what if this happens? And Hashem is like, don't worry, here's what you'll do. He's like, what if this happens? Like, don't worry, you'll have a sign for this. They'll know that you're coming from Hashem. But what about my speech? Don't worry, your brother Aaron will be your mouthpiece. So there's a lot more reassurance, and this is sort of like a very basic answer. So why sort of like the coldness and the basicness of it? Okay, so the first thing also about this response that I was also mentioned in some of the resources I looked up is that Moshe is talking to Hashem like a friend, and Hashem is responding in a very down-to-earth way. So it's clear that their relationship was there, and also should speak to us about how we can and should be speaking to Hashem. It reminded me of an incident that happened at work this week where I supervised therapists, and I told one of my therapists to do something that he did not want to do. He had to like take back this client. He was very not happy about it, and he had a little bit of a reaction to me. Like, he's respectful, we have a good relationship, but he was annoyed. And I was talking about it with my director, and she was like, you know what? I think the fact that he reacted to you really speaks to the fact that you guys have a good relationship. You only do that with somebody who you feel comfortable with, right? You're not gonna say like, I'm so overwhelmed, please kill me if you find, if you'll allow it to happen with a entity that you don't feel truly close to, right? So it just speaks a lot to their level of their relationship, and even for us to remember, if people are acting certain ways towards us, hopefully a good spin on that is that they feel that they're able to with us. And again, just really speaks to the closeness of Hashem and Moshe and how we can and should relate to God also. Okay, so why such a basic response? So we learn a couple of interesting lessons about how to inspire people. And this connects to something that happens earlier in the Parsha. The name of the Parsha is Beha'alosecha. And the reason for that is because in the beginning, when Aaron is being taught how to light the menorah for the first time in the Mishkan, the word that's used for lighting the candles is Beha'alosecha es haneros, which means normally in modern Hebrew, you would say lahadlik es haneros, to light a candle. The word Beha'alosecha famously means to like cause the light to be raised up. Yeah, like aliyah, to like raise up the candles. So the difference is, Rashi says, is that he shouldn't just like place a match to it and walk away. He's got to really stay there and stand there and make sure that the flame really takes, right? Don't leave until the candle is really burning on its own. Lahadlik es haneros, I think of like, you take a cab in Israel, you say like, afshar lahadlik et hamazgan, like turn on the AC, right? It's just like a simple action you're doing unto something else, and it's a very simple process. Beha'alosecha es haneros is more of involved, you're attending to them, you're making sure that it really catches, you're spending more time. So there's many vorts that come out of that word about, raising children and chinuch, and how you have to really make sure that you're not just like teaching someone something and walking away, but you make sure that it really gets integrated into what they know and that they're thriving. Yeah. So this is what Hashem was doing with Moshe, right? Which we'll explain in a minute. He wasn't just telling Moshe, don't worry, it'll be fine. I got you, I'll take care of you, right? Which validating can really do, can make someone feel in that moment better. But he was putting Moshe in a position where he was, no, it's okay. He was putting Moshe in a position where Moshe was feeling, very overwhelmed. Everything is chaos. I can't handle this. I don't have the capacity to deal with this challenge. So Hashem wasn't just saying, don't worry, you got it. He was giving him instructions, establish for yourself 70 elders, establish for me. He was putting him in a place where he would see from within that he could handle it. And we'll say a little bit more about this. So Moshe goes ahead. He finds these 70 elders, right, amongst Bnei Yisrael to help him with, this is separate from the judges that were set up with his father-in-law Yisro, but it's some sort of like support system where there was just more people and more of a government and more of an infrastructure to like manage Bnei Yisrael and all the complaints and all the things that need to be done. It wasn't just falling on him. So Rashi says, again, compares Moshe to a candle. When he sets up these 70 people, he sort of like trains them in. They all get nevuah. And so he's not the only one with nevuah. And it compares Moshe to a candle in that if you take a candle and you light a bunch of candles with it, the original candle is not diminished, right? This is a famous Rashi on that piece. So Hashem telling Moshe, here's the answer to your problem, right? Go set up this system. It's putting him in a position where, look, you do have the capacity to deal with Bnei Yisrael, right? You've set up a support network for yourself, which I found interesting also that is a way. We sometimes think of like, I can't handle my own problems so that I have to get other people to help me. But getting a support network for yourself to help you with whatever you need is part of managing that challenge, right? That is a tool. It's not going outside of what you can handle. Look, you've set up the support network for yourself. You gave so much to them and yet you were not diminished. Look at your capacity, look how much you have to offer, right? It's like reassuring Moshe from the inside out, you can handle this. You are the right person for this job. And instead of me just telling you, I've put you in a place where you have the opportunity to see it for yourself, right? You can now recall this incident. Instead of your reassurance coming from the outside, you have it within you. You've done something that proves how much you're capable of. Okay. And these are important lessons, I would say, whether we find ourselves on the reassuring end, which of course happens with like friends and family members, and for sure within parenting, right? Where you have to be able, someone comes to you and they want reassurance, or they want guidance or advice. There's always just giving unto them. You light the candle, you walk away. You like turn on the AC, you walk away. And there's showing them or inspiring them from within, right? You have them model something that they can do. It's like when you're teaching a kid to do, you know, whatever, you might do it once and they watch, and then you have them do it. That's the best way for them to learn, is for them to like get hands-on experience of being successful in a certain area. And of course, there's also a lot of, you know, Divrei Torah about how when you're inspiring others with Judaism, you've got to make sure it sticks. You've got to show them from the inside what they are capable of, instead of just telling them from, you know, your voice, which is outside of them. And I find that this is also very helpful for ourselves when we're facing challenges, which I'll give you an example of something I went through recently. To remind us of how big our capacities are. Again, I'm a therapist. This comes up all the time. If somebody's saying like, I feel like I can't do this, I'm feeling nervous about an upcoming event, I always compare it to, if someone's nervous about something that's going to come up, I have a family reunion that I'm so stressed out about, you don't just tell them, of course, it's going to be fine. You ask them, tell me, were there previous experiences that were similar to this stressor coming up that you handled successfully? How did you manage those, right? You get them from within their own memories and their own successes to recall what tools they used. And it's all about capacity, what we can handle. So there were like, you know how like Pesach vacation for children starts like 3 weeks before Pesach starts, so early. And it's all like the mowers have to get ready for Pesach. It's like, right, what about the moms? Like there's only like 5 mowers in a school, but there's like hundreds of moms. But so I was staring.
Set up like a rotating system where like
yes.
one Laura stays with everyone at a time. Like,
it's just got to be one person. Just stick them in a room. I'm fine. But like, yes, they're home.
Gym, but like let one person.
They were home like a full like week and a half before Pesach, something, maybe a full week, something crazy like that. And Yoni, of course, is working. So I was like staring down the barrel. I remember staring down the barrel of like, there are so many days of like really intensive childcare by myself, somehow having to like also prepare for Pesach, and you're supposed to do all of this with like a smile on your face and like not getting mad at your kids and like not getting chametz anywhere. It's like this impossible situation. And I had to just like stop myself. It was getting into this like, what the heck am I gonna do? Along with like a bunch of other mothers all over the country and the world, like, you know, freaking out about the same thing. And I remember thinking like, okay, if you're pouring water from one cup into the other, right, you would only be nervous about it spilling over if you weren't sure how much liquid, what the capacity was of each cup. Let's say you have 2 different size cups, right? If you knew for a fact, let's say this is a 6-ounce cup, if I had a 10-ounce bowl and I was pouring into it, I could like do it quickly, wouldn't think twice about it, because I know that the capacity of the bowl is bigger than that of the cup. And I remember thinking to myself, like, I have to assume that I am a 10-ounce bowl. Like I'm channeling the bowl. I was telling myself this in traffic, going to pick up my baby at the beginning of these like 5 days of childcare. I am a 10-ounce bowl. I am a 10-ounce bowl. I was like, I have to go into this challenge assuming that I have the tools to deal with it. Not like, am I gonna make it? I don't know. Am I gonna murder my children and leave them in a ditch? Maybe, who knows? But like, no, none of that is an option. Am I gonna run away screaming and go live on the beach? Like, I don't know. We'll see. I don't know how this is gonna turn out. But I had to go into it thinking like, Hashem has given you the tools to deal with this successfully. You have the capacity. You're a 10-ounce bowl. And like they say, like if Hashem brings you to it, he'll bring you through it, which is like sometimes a very hard thing to connect to. You're like, I don't feel like I can.
More than you can handle. You know?
And you're like, I don't feel like I'm handling this very well. Like, I don't know. Is that really true? So that became my mantra. I am a 10-ounce bowl. And I feel like it applies here, right? Showing Moshe, you are a 10-ounce bowl. You have the capacity to deal with this. We might not always be able to like connect to what our capacity is, but to recall specific scenarios where we filled our capacity and we did it maybe gracefully, maybe not, but those are the best ways of getting through challenges. Okay. So there's another interesting way, a few other interesting ways that like the candle comes into the picture through this parsha. In Mishlei it says, Ner Hashem Nishmas Adam, the flame of Hashem is a human soul. Rav Shlomo Zalman of Liadi, who was the first Lubavitcher Rebbe, says that a candle is compared to a person, and he describes it where like, what is a candle or a burning, anything that's burning? You have the fuel, which is, let's say, oil, and you have the wick. And the wick on its own, the wick he compares to the human body, or I would say even the human condition, being here on earth and like your physical human form. The wick of a candle lit on its own, it's a piece of string. It burns for what, 5 seconds, and then it's out and it's useless. And the oil is really what's combustible, but you can't light oil on its own, right? It needs to be channeled through the wick. So he compares the wick to the human body, the human condition. Oil is Torah, right? So the Torah is what is the fuel, but it cannot be lit or ignited on its own. It has to be manifested through some sort of physical thing. So the only way Torah comes down to earth is like through people learning and teaching Torah, doing mitzvos, talking about Hashem, being Jews. So it needs this duality of two things in order to form. Once it has those two things, it can form some sort of like steady, solid, light source, right? Okay. And this brings us to the last really interesting piece of this parsha, which...
Sorry, I didn't get what's the nimshal?
We're getting there.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Just so it...
I thought I missed it.
No, it's just that the body, human life world is the wick, Torah is the oil, and it needs this duality of like the spiritual and the physical. So this actually was also reminded me of something that Shmuley mentioned in his Shavua Shir. Okay. So a huge question on this parsha. Again, Bnei Israel is leaving Har Sinai. They've been there for a year. They got the Torah there. And they're complaining about the man. And I think Shmuley was talking about it in terms of Chet Egel, but it's like, you literally just got the Torah like a minute ago. You're still there. Like you're still at Har Sinai. How is this possible? And when Shmuley mentioned it, I was cracking up because it's kind of really relatable. Like we whine all the time in our lives about things that are dumb, and it's not even as glaring it's like, oh, we're all just dumb people, like whether we were like Bnei Israel, like it's very like connecting. I feel like, they say like your neshama was there, and it's like, yeah, I feel that. I relate to these people sometimes when they're whining and being bad, but
or like you just double parked, but then you get really annoyed at other people.
Of course,
like,
you know what I feel?
Blocking the street?
I think somehow they should create a module where every driver has to somehow drive behind themselves, like some computer program where it tracks you, and then you have to drive behind yourself and like see how annoyed you get, experience your own driving.
What a bad driver you really are now.
Yeah, like right, we'll be done in 5 minutes. Thanks. So yes, we complain about a lot, and like I was just cracking up about this because it's so absurd and so ridiculous, but like humans are humans, no matter where they are, no matter what they're doing. Okay, so how is this possible? What were they doing? Were they so disconnected from like this momentous occasion that just happened? So no. Well, at least there's other interpretations. Rav Chaim Ozer Grudzinski says that for this past year, since they were brought out of Mitzrayim, and one could argue even once the plagues were starting, there's all these open miracles, they had been living in this like bubble of a supernatural life. This was not the world as we know it, right? We know that they didn't have to do laundry, they didn't outgrow their clothes, they had this like miracle food dropping all over the place. It was sort of like suspended reality. They weren't living in the world as we know it. It was this like static existence of pure spirituality, open miracles, communing with Hashem. They had just received the Torah. So he says that they were eager to leave Har Sinai, and they were complaining about the man. He says it wasn't that they were disconnected from what had happened, it's that they were eager to get back into the world because of this concept where true Torah and light in the world needs a physical manifestation. It's not about, and I've mentioned this in previous shirim because I think it's such a point that like people don't always really take home, like you need the human part of it. I think people think sometimes of Judaism like the way really it's Christianity, like you should be separate from everything physical, you should be you should not like partake of it, but it's really not true, where you need that duality. And they were like, no, we want to get back to it, right? We want to get back to like our real role. This is not the way after Gan Eden, this is not the way God set up the world to be, where you're living in a bubble and you don't have to do anything, you don't have to work, you don't have to till the land, you don't have to farm any animals or prepare any food. And in a way, that almost sounds like idyllic, right? You don't have to do anything. But that also, if we remember in Gan Eden, the punishment for the snake, when he like led them, especially Chava, astray, was that he had no more feet. Yeah, he had to slither on the ground and he ate dust. And it's like, oh, that sounds wonderful. Food is so plentiful. He doesn't want for anything. He's right there in his food. And obviously the lesson is that there was no more reason for him to connect to God. He didn't want for anything. So there was nothing to ask for. There was no struggle. There was no challenge. There was like, you're not really engaged in this life without struggle and without the ups and downs, with just this static existence. So if Chaim Ozer says that Bnei Yisrael were eager to get back to that place. Their mistake was not necessarily in their eagerness, right? Their hearts were in the right place, but that they were still acting based on their own desire. I really want to get back into the world, right? And Hashem was saying, no. I'm saying, it's like someone who's learning how to drive and they were like, I really want to go on the highway. I feel like I'm ready. And the driving instructor is like, no, I'm telling you, you need another week of side street driving. For that person to go, rumbling onto the highway is like a horrible thing. I know you're ready. And I know it's like because you want to be independent and you have all these good intentions, but it's not really about what you want. Being able to submit to a higher power. And even if it's coming from a good place, and even if you have this fire behind you, but sometimes it's harder when you're feeling really motivated to hold back, but sometimes that's what's called for. So,
and what's interesting, it also goes the other way around. And when you're busy with the mundane,
for sure,
you don't want to see the spirituality.
Totally.
Hashem's bringing you back there. So
Totally. And I think exactly that, like either, no matter how you're feeling, right, whether you're feeling really on fire, whether you're feeling like really not into it and not motivated, sometimes it's not about how you're feeling. And like, we know this about in relationships where like, emotions are very fickle. They come, they go, they this, they that. Depends on how much you ate that day. There's dependent on such little changes in our physiological status at the time that the big things that we do and the decisions that we make have to be based on more than feelings. So this is Hashem saying, love the enthusiasm, but you're still not doing what I'm asking of you, and that's why they're criticized. And he, Hashem, his response to their complaint about the man is like, oh, you want meat? You're gonna get some meat. It's gonna be coming out of your nose. So this speaks again, like we said, to the balance. You need the physical manifestation, but even with that balance that's needed, it's not always up to us to decide, how and when to find that balance, or it should not be feelings based. I'm sure we all know people who maybe sometimes are not so feelings oriented, or they're a little, maybe they don't do too enough. And I know some people who are like too in their feelings and maybe not practicing enough Torah. Like, are you waking up for Shacharis on time? Are you like doing actual mitzvos, or do you just feel really connected? And sometimes it's the opposite, right? So it depends on the person, and finding the balance is not, our barometer is not our emotions. So just pulling it all together, a few points that we've touched on. We're almost done. We're finishing in 1 minute. Yeah.
They use it after, but they can also find. I asked one about.
It's fine. We're just wrapping it up. We're almost done. So now we can eat sushi. But that, I love, just to recap some of the points that we made. The way that Moshe and Hashem interacting. Hashem is your friend. Hashem is there to hear about your. When you're like totally at your wit's end and you're feeling very raw and emotional, you don't have to show up in your, Sunday best for davening and talking to Hashem. These are supposed to be like the raw, real interactions. We talked about, the best way to inspire people or to help them stabilize or to help them grow is to make sure that they have something coming from within, the same way that our own, Beha'alosecha and Eros was able to let the candles burn on their own. Our goal is not to be outside supporters for people, but to have them support themselves from within, stand on their own 2 feet. For us to do that for ourselves, right? Be the 10-ounce bowl, make sure that we're remembering how much capacity we have, right? Just like Hashem gave Moshe the opportunity to recognize the capacity that he had by establishing a support system, which is part of solving your problems, not outside of how we solve our problems. And then leaning into the balance of, bringing Torah into the world. We elevate the mundane. We don't separate from the mundane, but also, relying on guidance, outside wiser guidance than just our own emotions to decide where and how to strike that balance. Good Shabbos.
Thank you.